let's dive into one of the most famous paradoxes from Zeno, known as the tortoise and Achilles race. In this paradox, we imagine the swift Achilles, the greatest runner of all, racing against a slow-moving tortoise. Despite Achilles' speed, Zeno suggests that he will never be able to catch up to the tortoise. But how is this possible? Look at the image. On the left, we see the tortoise slowly creeping along, while on the right, Achilles is racing forward with incredible speed. Now, here's where Zeno's reasoning comes into play. Zeno argues that by the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise started, the tortoise will have moved a little further ahead. Think about each time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise was. The tortoise moves a little further ahead. By the time Achilles reaches that new point, the tortoise has moved again. And this continues infinitely. No matter how fast Achilles runs, there is always more ground for him to cover before he reaches the tortoise. This creates the illusion that Achilles can never overtake the tortoise. Pause for reflection. Zeno's paradox isn't just about a race, it challenges our perception of time and motion. It makes us question, how can something move forward when there are always more steps to take? Is motion truly continuous, or is it just an endless series of smaller steps that we fail to notice? Imagine yourself running alongside Achilles, feeling the wind rush past as he races towards the tortoise. Yet, no matter how fast he runs, the distance between them keeps extending. The race seems never-ending, and the finish line remains just out of reach. This paradox forces us to think about infinity and the nature of time, challenging everything we know about movement and progress. Now, we dive into another paradox from Zeno, known as the arrow paradox. Imagine you are watching an arrow in flight. At first glance, the arrow seems to be moving. However, Zeno argues that before the arrow can reach its target, it must first cover half the distance to the target, but then it must cover half of the remaining distance, and so on, infinitely. Here's the key visual. An arrow is divided into segments, each representing a step in the arrow's journey. According to Zeno, there are infinite steps between the arrow's starting point and its destination. If there are infinite steps, how can the arrow ever actually reach the target? It seems as though the arrow is frozen in time, stuck in an infinite number of smaller steps. This paradox challenges our understanding of motion. We often think of movement as continuous, but Zeno's paradox forces us to consider motion as a series of infinitely smaller steps. Can anything truly move if each step is infinitely divisible? Think about your own life. Do you ever feel like you're moving forward, but never quite reaching the destination? Is life an endless journey of small steps, each leading us to new beginnings rather than final conclusions? Now, let's consider one of the most famous thought experiments in philosophy, the ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, an ancient vessel that has sailed across the seas, carrying kings and treasures. Over time, however, the parts of this ship are replaced. First, a plank is replaced. Then the sail is swapped out. Gradually, every single part of the ship is replaced, until no original part remains. Now, the question is this still the same ship? Here we see an illustration of a ship, with parts being replaced one by one, until the ship on the right looks entirely new, though it is made from the parts of the original vessel. The paradox asks, does this new ship, with all its parts replaced, still hold the identity of the original ship? Or is it a completely new entity? This paradox challenges our understanding of identity and change. If every part of a thing is replaced, can it still be the same thing? Does the identity of an object lie in its individual parts, or in the overall structure and continuity? Now, let's take it a step further. Imagine that someone has kept all the parts that were replaced from the original ship. Over time, they assemble these parts into a new ship. Is this new ship the real ship of Theseus, or is it a mere imitation? And if it is the same ship, how do we define what makes something the same over time, as it undergoes change? This paradox doesn't just apply to ships, it can be applied to anything: our bodies, our memories, even our identities. As we grow and change, What makes us us? Are we defined by our past experiences or by the person we are now? T. Imagine this. A judge informs a condemned man that he will be hanged at noon on one weekday, but with a twist. The hanging will be a surprise. The man will not know which day the execution will occur until the morning of the hanging itself. The judge further adds a condition. The hanging must occur on one weekday, but the condemned man is guaranteed that he will not know the day in advance. As the man sits in his cell, he tries to reason out the situation. He believes that the hanging cannot take place on Friday, because if he hasn't been hanged by Thursday, then Friday would be the only remaining option, and he would know about it. So, he concludes that the hanging cannot happen on Friday. Then, he reasons that since Friday is impossible, the hanging can't occur on Thursday either. If the man hasn't been hanged by Wednesday, then Thursday becomes the only possibility, and thus no surprise would remain. He continues this process, eliminating each weekday one by one, convincing himself that the hanging cannot happen at all. But on the day of the hanging, the unexpected occurs. The man is hanged, and it is a complete surprise. This paradox presents an intriguing challenge to our understanding of prediction and certainty. The man's reasoning seems sound, yet reality defies his expectations. The unexpected hanging paradox forces us to consider the limitations of our own predictions and the complexities of certainty. Now, we delve into a paradox that has fascinated time travel enthusiasts and philosophers alike, the grandfather paradox. Imagine you are a time traveler with a device that allows you to travel through time. One day, you decide to go back in time to a period long before you were born. You arrive in the past, and in a twist of fate, you prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. Now, here's the catch. If your grandfather never meets your grandmother, they can never marry, and thus, you would never be born. If you were never born, you could never have traveled back in time to prevent the meeting in the first place. This creates a paradox. If your actions in the past undo your very existence, how could those actions have taken place? The paradox raises deep questions about the nature of time and causality. If events can be altered in the past, does that mean time is flexible? Or does it mean that time is fixed, and the actions of the time traveler are part of a loop that has always been destined to happen? Picture yourself standing next to your younger grandfather, watching the moments that will never come to pass. The weight of your actions seems to ripple through time, and the paradox deepens. Could time truly be changed, or is it always in motion, fixed, and unalterable? The grandfather paradox doesn't just challenge our understanding of time, it forces us to confront the very concept of causality and the possibility of alternate realities or timelines. Could we, in fact, travel back in time and change the future? Or would we simply become part of a preordained loop that always existed?
Next, we encounter one of the most intriguing paradoxes in logic, known as the liar paradox. This paradox begins with a simple statement. This statement is false. At first glance, this may seem like an ordinary statement, but let's think it through carefully. Imagine a spiral with the words, "This statement is false," written over and over again, spiraling into infinity. The paradox occurs because if the statement is true, then the statement must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. This creates a loop of contradictions that cannot be resolved. This paradox challenges our understanding of truth itself. If a statement refers to its own truth value, then it can't consistently be either true or false. The statement, "This statement is false," creates a paradox where truth and falsehood become interchangeable, causing an infinite cycle. Think about how we use language in our daily lives. We often take statements for granted, believing them to be true or false without considering the deeper implications of self-reference. But the liar paradox forces us to rethink this certainty, showing that sometimes logic can lead us into unresolvable loops. At its core, the liar paradox invites us to reflect on the nature of truth and falsehood. Can something truly be both true and false at the same time? And how do we reconcile contradictions that arise from self-referential statements? The paradox remains unsolved, forcing us to accept the complexity and ambiguity inherent in logic and language.